And welcome back to another lesson of Logos and Letters. My name is Liam. So the last few lessons have been a bit of a tough one to get through because the content that I was teaching, although it was necessary and useful, it's just hard to stir the emotions with such content. But this next part is quite interesting. I found it a little bit far more stimulating than the last stuff when I first came across it. So, etitoi posoi uden esti enantion. I want to pause there straight away. So, this sentence is like lightning. Like even the length of the sentence. Look how much shorter this sentence is compared to all the other ones that follow it, right? He drops it there as like a mic drop. No, not a mic drop. As like a lightning bolt from Zeus, right? Etitoi posoi uden estin enantion. There is no contrary to quantities. Where have we heard that before? We've heard it before in chapter 5. Right? Chapter 5. Where is I'm not going to find it, but if we go back up here, this is chapter 5. There was somewhere in here where it said that where there is no contraries to substance. So those are two things that are in common between these two. One thing that's in common between these two. Substance and quantities do not have contraries. What a strange thing to think about. So the first category, which is substance, all right, which is like this tree and the clouds, the hills, and even the lake, are all primary substances. And there's no contrary to a primary substance, right? And that was understandable. But now we're being told that quantities also do not have a contrary. So somehow this accident has something in common with the foremost category in the 10 highest genera. Which I get it. If people are like, I don't really care. But I get it. But spend more time with this stuff. Spend more time thinking about this stuff. And it sort of does start to really strike you as incredible. Like in both senses of the word. The modern sense of that word and the etymological sense of that word. Incredible. And you sort of just wonder why. And you can figure out why eventually. I'm not going to spoon feed that to you right now. But you'll get the picture as we go along. Etitoi posoi to quantities. Uden estin. There is no enantion, contrary. Epimengar ton aphorismenon phaneron. Hoti uden estin enantion. Hoyon toi tipe kai e tripe kai. Now this one is 2 cubits and 3 cubits. I know we don't use cubits anymore. We've moved past that. But these are these first examples. Right? Like it appears that there is no contrary. So to just as to 2 cubits or 3 cubits. And if you think about that, right? Like imagine you calculated all these trees. How many trees were, or how great of a volume this lake was in water-wise. And you had that number. Any of those numbers, or both. Or the numbers of 2 cubits or 3 cubits, right? These quantities. Now ask yourself, what's the opposite of that? So say if you had 50,000 trees in your national park. You're asking yourself, what's the opposite? More specifically, what's contrary to 50,000? You might think to yourself, well, negative 50,000. Right? So minus 50,000. But, okay, why? Why is that contrary to 50,000? Why is that something that destroys the other? Because remember, in logic, contrary means one can't exist in the same space as the other. So heat and cold sort of destroy each other in the process of heating up or cooling down, right? They're contrary. They don't really share the same space in the same body. You don't suffer from hypothermia and hypothermia at the exact same time, right? We don't ever worry about our sun becoming cold. Okay, there is science that out there that has proven that some stars are in fact quite cold. I know there's one star in particular that's the same temperature as I think it's Antarctica or just the Arctic. Either one of those, but that's beside the point. What we're saying is these numbers, they don't compete with anything else. There's nothing that competes with them. There's nothing that cannot share the space with them, right? If there are 50,000 trees here, right, that means there's 50,000 unities, 50,000 primary substances, but that's the key. That's what links those two ideas, right, is the fact that quantities represent unities. So you say there are two ships. What you're saying is that there are two unities of the same class, same species, that can be grouped together, that are grouped together by the intellect. But they're still two unities. They're not. You don't put two ships by themselves side by side and they just merge together into some beastly creature. All these human beings, stay separate. They're unities. They don't all, because they're in proximity to each other, merge together into some horrific monster. So that's the interesting part. Our intellect is grouping these things, saying, oh, they're all the same and I can count them. They're still unities. But a unity means one. Unity means one. And what's that one thing? A primary substance. A primary substance has no contrary and is still like a number in a way. It's still, by the reason, intellectually, one. And one is a discrete quantity. It's a definite quantity. Okay, so there is such a strange and interesting connection between these two categories of substance and quantity. Something very real, I know like it's so sort of abstract what I'm talking about and strange, but it's exciting, it's interesting, because we're speaking about real, actual, proper intelligible way of understanding our universe, right? And if it was purposeful, it was meant to be understood. Why was it meant to be understood? We will find out. Te epifanaia fanaie ton toiu ton dini, right? So or of some surface, right? There's no contrary to some surface. You can't say, hey, this sail is contrary to the rectangular sails. What silliness, right? It doesn't make any sense. There's first of all, in two different ways. A, because we're speaking about the substance itself, which has no contrary, but also the surface itself, the epiphanai, right? So like, there's no contrary to it. Right? It doesn't have to compete for space with anything else in that way. Just doesn't. All right, so let's go back. Let's continue on. This is pretty clear so far. Udengar restin autois enantion. Right? And for all other kinds of quantities, there is no contrary. Ime arra to polutoi oligoi fae tis ainai enantion eto mega toi microi. So this is a good counterexample. Before, I gave you the counterexample of negative numbers, which really don't even signify unities in the first place. That's why I didn't really need to explain that too much. They don't really signify anything, the negative number. They sort of just signify like an absence of a thing, or an owing of a thing in finance. So you just leave that alone. It doesn't need its explanation. But here's a good counter argument. Maybe some of you were thinking about it, and bravo to you if you were, because it's a strong counter argument. He even addresses it here. So not unless someone should say the great to the few. right? Say, someone. Okay. And he presents another one here. He goes, is contrary, or the great to the little. Okay. But he says in reply to this, like contrary quantities, uden garauto gathauto megalegatai e micron alatoi pros heteron ana ferestai. So nothing is like said to be great or to be small on its own, in accordance with its own. So, or absolutely. So this lady here, this sorceress, enchantress, is not tall or short on her own. She's tall or short in relation to something else, which is interesting in itself, because that's another category, right? You can see how all the categories knit together and weave together are the reality that we experience, right? This crow isn't short or large or great in weight, absolutely, only in relation to other crows or ravens, whatever they happen to be. If another man or woman came along and stood next to her, right, and let's say he's this tall, he's like, she comes up to like his chest, his shoulders are here and his head is here, right? Okay, now she's short, because she's short in relation to this really tall guy. I don't know why I'm making up a fake person. I'm sure I can just find another painting that has two people standing next to each other. One is short, one is tall, one is short, one is tall. Of course I can't find one when I've got a million things of it, because they're all in the same pose. Goodness gracious me, come on. Why is everyone the same height in these? There we go. Alright, so here look. Short, tall. Not by themselves, but in relation one to the other. Short, tall. And she's like sort of neither. Right? And then you talk about weight. Okay? You talk about in relation to each other. Great. Little. Few. Right? No, few doesn't make sense, but little weight. Great weight. Okay? Let's say he's 80 kilograms and she's, I don't know, 30, 35, whatever. All right? So in relation to each other. But just absolutely by themselves, we don't speak like that. If there was one human being on Mars, right? Aliens came and interacted with that human being, they wouldn't know what to make of him without other human beings to study as well, because how can they say if he's tall or short or large or, you know, all these other things? You need to put it in relation to something else. Same with these, this crop of something. Each one of them isn't large or small by itself, only in relation to the others. Okay, so on and so forth. Go back to it. Alla toi pros heteron ana ferestai, right? So in relation to something else. Hoyon oros men micron legatai. Great example. Great example. Just as a mountain, right, or a large hill can be said to be small, right? Don't we say that quite often? Mountain. All right, this one. This mountain, you know, these guys are standing here and just admiring. They're saying, what a large mountain, you know, and they're saying that one's a small mountain. And they say that's small and that's large. Small? What are you talking about? So this guy might be the tallest guy in the village and he's called big, but they're calling this small. You know, how can they call him big when that is small? See what I mean? It's always in relation to something else of its kind. Okay, and he might be tall in his village, but he goes to the other village on the other side of the mountains, and they're all enormous people, right? They're all 6'2" at least, okay, right? Easily reaching the 6'4", and this guy's just a humble something else. not quite at that stature, but in his own village, he's the tallest, right? Always in relation, never absolutely, which is such an interesting way how relation, which is it gets its own thorough treatment in this book, brings about more understanding, brings about more distinguishing of substance. How substance doesn't rely on these categories for it, but I don't know, I almost want to say it is benefited by this like movement of the intellect to compare one thing with another. Kegros de megale doi dein men don homogenon, the same genus, the same family, mais donna ainai, right? So like what I was saying, you've got to compare things in the same genus, same species, right? We compare the size of men to the size of other men. We compare the size of mountains to the size of other mountains, and so on and so forth. So you have a like megale, the magnitude, almost the greatness of something, always compared, like the greater to the lesser. Elaton is lesser, mais donna is the greater, in the same genus. Okay, ukun pros heteron he anaphora epige kath auto micron he mega elegato ukan pote domen horos micron elegato. Right, so in this sentence he's just describing that it doesn't necessarily need a relation, right? A relation isn't a necessary thing that has to happen, but when it does happen, that's when words that describe magnitude or volume or size become useful, right? Just describing one single thing with a sense of magnitude, like it is very great, this mountain, sort of begs the question of compared to what? You know, what mountains do you know? What mountains do you see? And it might be better with ships, okay? All right, this ship, right, is in full sail, going at a rate of knots. And someone can measure how long it takes, like the action, the movement, and say, it is very fast. Very fast compared to what? Other ships of its kind, its genus, its species? Fair enough. Fair enough, it is very fast. But it can't be very fast compared to ships of a different kind. Like if there was a modern speedboat, if there was a modern cruiser or destroyer, okay, it's going to go much faster than this. So only comparing it to things of it in its own genus is the way to go, and is, you know, the proper way of doing things. Same with human beings, okay? So a human being that you know who's very fast, whether you know them personally or just through the media or whatever, you know, this very fast human being compared to a cheetah or a peregrine falcon or many other birds, you know, is not fast, cannot cover distance at the same rate as those other animals across certain distances. Okay, so that's the way it goes. That's fair, and that's a proper way of considering this. Like even right here, straight away it says of the same species, of the same genera. We'll leave it there. We've covered a lot. Pretty straightforward and simple lesson, but the key thing is that etitoi possoi ulenestin elantion. There's no contrary to quantities, and there's no contrary to substance. An interesting connection. If you come away learning a few of those things, you're in good stead. As always, thank you so much for watching. Si semper fortis in opere tuo, and I'll see you next time.